Okay, welcome to another video. So Fedora 35 has now been officially released, and that was on November the 2nd. Now the plan is to get around to checking out the main version, which is of course featuring GNOME 41. However, the thing that excites me the most is the new official spin of Fedora 35, which is Fedora Kinoite, which is a reprovisionable desktop system featuring the KDE Plasma desktop. So from what I've read, it's pretty much similar to Silverblue, but it ships with the KDE desktop, and I'm a huge fan of the way Silverblue works and the immutable operating systems, so I'm very intrigued to see how this is all set up and working out of the box. So if we jump over to the Fedora Kinoite website, we can read a little bit more about it before we jump into it and get this installed. So as a little headline here: surf the web, keep in touch with friends, manage files, enjoy music and video, get productive at work without having to worry about breaking your system. And that is one of the main sort of features of an immutable distribution. So it's of course built on Fedora, the Plasma desktop, and the applications for the most part are going to be Flatpak applications. And we also do have the use of RPM OS trees, so we can still layer system applications, but we'll get into that once we are fully installed. And then we of course have the sort of container technology of Podman. Now for those of you who are excited to check this out on your own machines, but you've never used an immutable operating system before, it's definitely worth opening up the Fedora Kinoite user guide and just getting acquainted with how things work before you jump straight into it. So as you can see, it's an immutable desktop operating system, so it's extremely stable and reliable, and it also aims to be an excellent platform for developers and for those using container workflows. So Kinoite is a variant of the Fedora KDE Spin, so it looks, feels and behaves like a regular desktop operating system. So it appears for the most part it's going to be set up out of the box in the same way as their standard Fedora KDE Spin, but of course the sort of things underpinning it are going to behave very differently. So this means that every installation is identical to every other installation of the same version. So all of this is intended to make things more stable, less prone to bugs, and easier to test and develop. It's available to download right now, and there's a few different architectures that you can choose from. So we're going to go ahead and be using the x86-64 version with an ISO file size of around about 3 GB or just under. With that being said, let's jump into it and get this installed. So we've just booted into the ISO and we're now ready to start the Fedora installation. Now, as always, I am going to be installing this natively, and like I always say in these videos, for those of you who do like to skip the installation process because you've seen this all before, there'll be a timestamp down below which will take you straight to the installed desktop. With that being said, first up we need to choose our language, and it's already got the correct selected one for me, which is English United Kingdom. So we can press continue to get to the installation summary. And here we are. So this is where you're going to configure and set up your system before you go ahead and click that begin installation button once it turns blue. Now we're going to start with localization. Usually I wouldn't really need to change anything here because it does a good job of pulling in the correct ones for me. So as we can see, it's got English UK, English United Kingdom, and then we have the Europe London time zone, which is correct. However, this isn't the first time I've gone ahead and tried to install this today. I encountered quite a strange bug that I've never really encountered on a Linux distribution before. But leaving it on my correct time zone and then getting into the desktop, nothing was behaving as it would. All of my icons were sort of disappearing, applications weren't launching properly, and I was really stumped as to what was the cause of this. I tried to narrow it down, but I kept failing. So as a last ditch attempt, I went onto the Fedora subreddit and I saw a couple of users experiencing the same kind of thing, and they mentioned that they changed the time zone away to a different time zone, and then once they got into the desktop, everything appeared to work as it should, and then they just changed their time zone back after the installation had finished. So super weird issue that I've never encountered before, but to save us time in this video, we're going to go ahead and just change it to any other time zone and then change it back at a later point once we have finished with the video. So I'm just going to chuck it there, which is going to be Chicago. And then we can go ahead through the rest of the steps and everything should work as intended. Now for system, this part is actually quite important. So with immutable systems like Fedora Kinoite or Silverblue, you kind of want to stick with the automatic partitioning scheme. They really don't advise you go ahead and try and set up dual boots or manual partitioning because it's not really fully supported. It can be done, but it can be a little bit tricky, and if you're not sure what to do here, either don't bother or just stick with the automatic partitioning. Now as this already has an active Fedora installation here, it is going to ask us to delete some space and reclaim it to make room for our new operating system. So we're going to press reclaim space, delete all, and then reclaim space, and then we can go ahead with the rest of the steps. I'm going to go ahead and enable the root account, so we're just going to press enable root account, type in our password, press done, and then that just leaves us with the user creation. So again, we're just going to create our user. We're going to make this one an administrator, type in our password, hit done, and we're good to go, and we can now begin the installation. So like I said, super simple, and we are ready to go. So I'll pause the video here and come back once it's finished. And there we go. So installation was super quick and easy and took around about 10 minutes or so on my machine. Now I have spoke to a few people that aren't massive fans of the installation process for Fedora, but as far as Linux installations go, I think it's pretty decent. It's simple enough, and if you have a particular way of setting up your system, you can go into the advanced settings as well. Now with that being said, let's reboot and check out our freshly installed Fedora 35 Kinoite. We've just booted up for the first time and landed at the login screen, and while we're here we'll just quickly go down to the bottom left and we can see that the default desktop session is selected as Plasma Wayland, but they do have an X11 session as well. Right, so here we are. It does look quite close to a stock KDE experience, but we'll get into that in just a moment. But as we can see, with that change of the time zone, that has fixed the issue that I and a few other users were experiencing when they've done a fresh install with the applications and the different icons. So they do all appear to be here, but we'll go through that in just a moment. So I think what we're going to do to start off with is just very quickly jump into the About section of KDE and see the versions of things that we have shipped with, and then we'll start taking a look around. So as far as KDE Plasma, we're using a nice fresh new version, which is 5.22.5. So we should have some of the new features like the adaptive panel transparency, the performance sort of improvements made in the background and all of that good stuff. And we can see there that the kernel version we are using is 5.14.10-300. Now if we just quickly open up console and type in lsblk, we can just quickly see how it's partitioned our drives before we start playing around with things. So let's just type in lsblk. And there we go. So we can see that we've got a few different partitions here. And of course the main partition is going to be using Btrfs as its default file system. And then we also have a RAM of 8 GB, which is configured as ZRAM. Now with that out of the way, let's have a quick run through of how the desktop has been set up. So I don't think there's too much sort of difference between this and the standard KDE spin for Fedora. But we'll have a little look as we run through things. So like I said, it does appear to be quite close to stock. We have a single panel layout with your panel at the bottom. And I'm going to imagine it is set up by default to have the adaptive panel transparency. It is indeed. So under opacity there, we can see that it's set to adaptive, and that means whenever we've got nothing near or interacting with our panel at the bottom or wherever you've got your panel placed, it's going to be the nice transparent color. But then the minute you've got an application maximized like so, it's going to go into a nice solid color with a smooth transition, and that'll help you not be as distracted by any sort of flashy transparency going on at the bottom of your screen, and is my preferred way to leave it on my panel. So we'll leave it like that. And it's a feature I've wanted in KDE for quite a long time, so it is nice it has been introduced in the more recent versions of KDE. We then have our standard status and notifications and all of that good stuff with our show desktop button right about there. We then have some pinned applications, and then we have a nice application launcher, and if we right click that, let's just close that for the moment. Let's see if it does come with any other alternatives. The pretty standard stuff is just going to come with the sort of full screen application dashboard, and then we also have the application menu. Now, if we go into the system settings, I do think we are using sort of standard Breeze themes. And while we're here, we can see another new feature of the more recent versions of KDE is the quick settings page on the sort of home page of the system settings application. And that will have commonly used settings that you might use, and it also has the most used. So if you just want to quickly jump into it and change something that you change quite regularly, it's a very nice way to not have to troll through all of the different menu items here on the left. So I think what we'll do is we'll very quickly jump into the appearance section and check out the theming. So we've got all of the sort of Breeze variations. We have Breeze, Breeze Dark, Breeze Twilight, and then we also have Fedora's own Fedora theme for KDE. And if we go down into icons, I'm going to imagine again we are using Breeze. So we have Eduardo, Breeze, and Breeze Dark. Now what I am going to be interested in checking out in just a moment, once we've checked a few other things, is how this is going to be handling the installation of themes and whether it does just work to get the new global themes there. We'll check that out in just a moment. Now as far as applications, Fedora is usually pretty good at not bloating things out too much, so you won't really find a whole lot here. But I like that because it lets you choose the applications you want. You don't have to sort of remove things and sort of pad it out with the things that you do actually use. So let's have a look at what we've got. So administration, we have our simple firewall application. In development, we have Qt5 dbus viewer. For graphics, we have GwenView and Ocular. For internet, we have Firefox. For Office, we have Ocular, so no sort of LibreOffice or anything like that. So you might want to go ahead and install an Office suite of your choice. And then we have system settings, and under system we have Discover. Now Discover is going to be the main place where you're going to be installing your applications in a GUI way, and we'll go into that in just a moment and how it's going to be implemented on this kind of system, and we will of course integrate it with the FlatHub repository because that is not enabled out of the box. So as you can see here, unable to load applications, but we'll fix that in just a moment. So let's close that one as well. And is there anything else we need to go over before we start taking a look around at some of the features of these immutable systems? No, standard stuff. So Dolphin is your file manager, of course, as well as console, and then we have system monitor for system monitoring, and then again in utilities, super simple KDE stuff. So for screenshots you've got Spectacle, text editor is Kwrite, Kmag, and all of that good stuff. And that's it. Yeah, so really not a bloated out system at all. So we will spend a little bit of time setting this up ready for a daily driver. Now I think what I want to do before we actually make any changes to the system is see how much RAM this uses on a fresh boot. So we are going to use HTOP. I know it comes with the system monitor, but I prefer using HTOP for things like this. So let's see if we've got that installed out of the box. We do not. So here's the first one that we're going to actually layer a package into our system image using RPM OS tree install. So that's what's quite interesting here. So for the main sort of focus of this distribution, you are going to be using Flatpak applications. But for things that you can't get as Flatpak, or just things that you do prefer to have at a system level or a native package, you do have the option of layering images, applications into images using RPM OS tree install. So if we just enlarge this text a little bit, so what we're going to do is type in RPM-OS tree install, and we're just going to install HTOP. So usually if I was doing this on my own machines, I wouldn't just go ahead and install one package at a time. I'd set my system up ready to go with just sort of as least amount of layerings that I can do, and then I would pad everything out with Flatpak applications. But for this simple little RAM check on a fresh boot, we're going to go ahead and install HTOP. So we're going to hit enter, and it will take a little bit longer than a standard package application, so we'll let that go and come back once that's finished. Right, so that package is now installed, and like I said, it did take a little bit longer than a standard package installation in Linux, but as we can see there just at the bottom it says changes queued for the next boot, so we won't be able to actually run that application yet. So if you type in HTOP, you can see that it's not going to find that command or application, and that's one of the things that really does set this apart from the more traditional way of using a Linux distribution, and one of its selling points in sort of terms of stability and being able to roll back. So what we'll do, we'll reboot, jump into this system image, and then check how much RAM we're using, and then we'll start playing around with things. So we just started the computer back up, and we're now at the bootloader screen, and as you can see here, there's a few different entries that we can go and actually jump into, and these will all kind of be like different deployments of images. So the one we want is the most recent one, which will have that package installation of HTOP, and of course the benefit of this is if you install something or make some changes and kind of break your system, although it is harder to do on these kind of distributions, you can just roll back to a previous image and be good to go. So we're going to go into this one, check out the RAM, and keep it moving. And there we go. So it really is just as simple as selecting the new entry that we just created after layering this package on top of it. And as you can see, we have HTOP running there in the terminal where we didn't have it before. And as we can see, the RAM usage isn't too bad, at around about 772 MB. So having the option to layer new packages with RPM OS tree install is a very cool feature, but of course the main way to really distribute applications on this system is to use Flatpak applications. Now we noticed that FlatHub wasn't enabled out of the box, so what we're going to do is just open up a web browser of Firefox. We're going to go to flathub.org, and then as you can see here we have the option for quick setup, so we're going to press that and then go straight to the Fedora icon. And it's super simple. All we need to do is just press this button here, and then that will let you open that up in Discover, and that will go ahead and enable the FlatHub repository for you, and then integrate it with Discover so you can install them straight from your Discover software center. So we're just going to press install, type in a password, and we should be good to go. So now that we've enabled FlatHub, if we go into our settings of Discover, we can see that we have FlatHub here ready to go. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a couple of different ways to go ahead and install applications. So you can now see that the featured list has been populated with applications pulled from FlatHub's repository. So we can very simply install them this way, or as well we could also just go to the FlatHub website, browse them through here, and then we can also install them this way. So we can type in Kden Live, for example, and then we could just click this one, and we can either do a little click install, or is there also a command that we can just go ahead and copy into our terminal like so. So we'll press this copy button. We'll open up console, we'll copy that in, and then that will go ahead and run through the steps to install that Flatpak application. Now usually, most of the time when you just set up FlatHub or Flatpaks on a new system, it will need to have a little reboot for it to integrate properly within your system. 9 times out of 10 it won't find the correct icon theme, etc. But We'll see how it handles it on Fedora's Kinoite KDE. Perfect, so that's now been installed. So if we go into our application launcher and just go into multimedia, let it update the applications. There we go. So like I thought, it's integrated into our system without any issues, but it hasn't pulled in the correct icon just yet. So what we're going to do is log out and log back in. You'll only need to do this once after you sort of initially set it up. After that, you'll be good to go. Okay, so we just log back into the desktop, and let's just quickly make sure that Kden Live is indeed working and has got the correct icon theme. And there we go. So that should load up without any issues whatsoever. Now, that whole way of installing applications is probably the longer way around now that we have FlatHub sort of integrated within our Discover Software Center. So what we're going to do is just quickly jump back into Discover. And installing new applications is as simple as typing in the application that you're looking for. So for example, let's go ahead and grab the application of Discord. And of course, for those of you who want to join the Tidus Tech Discord server, there'll be a link in the description down below. So we're just going to press install, and that will go ahead and do everything it needs to set up Discord on our machine. And we are done. So like I said, this time we shouldn't need to log out or log back in. It should just pull in the icon theme without any issues whatsoever. So if we use KRunner once more and type in Discord, there we can see we do indeed have Discord with the correct icon theme ready to go. So I think what I'm going to do, just to show you how you can really kind of set up your system 99% with just Flatpak applications, I'm going to go ahead and set this up as sort of a daily driver and grab all of the applications that I use on a daily basis, and then we'll keep it moving. So I'll pause the video and then we'll come back in just a moment. Okay, so I've gone ahead and installed most of the applications I do tend to use on a daily basis, and fortunately most of the applications that I do use are available as Flatpak applications. Now for the things that aren't, so things like sort of virtual machine applications and stuff like that, I'm more than happy to go ahead and just use sort of RPM OS tree install to sort of cover the gaps where there aren't really Flatpak applications available for such applications. But for the most part, we're pretty much good to go. So we've got GIMP, we've got OBS for screen capture, we've got Kden Live to edit the videos, we've even got Steam, so we can go ahead and play all of our Steam games. We have my favourite music player of Elisa. We have the LibreOffice suite, so we're all good to go with that. We also have Thunderbird, Chromium and Telegram. Now there are a few more applications that I'd probably go ahead and install, but just a quick show, you can really get by these days on mainly just Flatpak applications. Of course, there will be the odd thing here and there that you just can't get as a Flatpak application. Now, as far as when it comes to updating your system, I think the main idea for Kinoite is to just sort of integrate it within your desktop and kind of do it automatically and notify you. But for those of you who want to go ahead and just open up a terminal and sort of issue the command yourself, you can just go RPM OS tree upgrade, and there we go. So it's gone ahead and deployed the new upgrade for our system, and all we need to do now, again much like when we done the RPM OS tree install, is go ahead and issue a reboot, and then it will jump straight into the new upgraded system. And there we go. So after a reboot, we are now fully up to date and in our fresh new system. Now there are of course other cool features of RPM OS tree, and Fedora does have a handy little cheat sheet which will talk you through some of the common things like cleaning up, rolling back and all of that good stuff. Now another cool feature that is included in Kinoite and also just Fedora Silverblue is the sort of toolbox containers. So if we open up a terminal and let's make it a little bit larger, and then we can see what's going on. So the idea of this is mainly more for developers, but it can be useful to test little applications yourself as well. So if we just quickly just type in toolbox create to create our first toolbox. So it's going to ask you if you want to download a toolbox of a Fedora Toolbox 35. We do indeed, and that's going to be 500 MB. And then once that's done, we simply just need to type in toolbox enter to then go inside of that toolbox or container like so. So we're going to type in toolbox enter, and we are now in a sort of clear sort of container of Fedora 35. So if we clear this up, we can see what's what. So for example, you're going to use DNF more sort of traditionally here as you would on a standard version of just Fedora. So for example, if you wanted to test a little application out, especially command line applications, which is what this is mainly geared towards. So if we wanted to try out, do we have WEM installed by default? I don't think we do we? We don't. So what we do then, we're going to go ahead and just go ahead and install that. So of course we can do the standard DNF stuff in here. So DNF search WEM. Perfect. So it's gone ahead and given us some results. So it has found a W3M package. So what we're going to go ahead and do is type in sudo DNF install and then type in W3M. And now we're ready to go ahead and install it. And of course this is just a super simple terminal based web browser. So all we need to do now is type in the application command, and then any old website will do. So let's go to tidustech.me. And then there we go. So that's all running in its own little container, which is very cool, and especially a cool little tool for developers to be built into your system. And it's completely separate to the whole RPM OS tree thing, so of course there will be no need to reboot and all of that kind of stuff. Now, like I said, really this is just a tool for testing out sort of command line tools and mainly for developers, but there are other cool little things you can do. So it does actually also work with most GUI apps as well. So as you can see there, I've installed Kate inside the container, and here it is on our host screen right there, and we can play around with it and all of that good stuff. Now, in my previous Fedora Silverblue videos, I go into a bit more detail and I split the video into 2 parts, and I'll use it for a good few days. So if you want to learn a little bit more about these sort of features and not the sort of KDE specific features, you can go ahead and watch those videos as well. Now, I am intrigued to see what we can do insofar as theming. So with GNOME, it's a little bit easier because most of the themes you can go ahead and download and just chuck them into your home folder. I'm not quite sure how it's going to work with sort of the global theming on KDE. So let's have a little look. So all we're going to go ahead and do is just click Get New Global Themes and see how far we get. So we're just going to type in a theme. Okay, so it's found the search, no problem whatsoever. Let's see if we can go ahead and install my preferred Lion theme. So we're going to press install and just see what happens. Okay, interesting. So we did get an error like I thought we was going to get, saying we could not decompress the archive. But it does say that it's installed. So let's see what happens. Let's press OK, and we're going to close this off and see if it is there. So there's Lion. Let's see if we can apply this theme. Okay, it does actually appear to have applied the theme without any issues there. So we've also got the correct icon theme of the sort of the Teller icon pack. Okay, so I think that seems to have worked. Okay, so I've just done a couple of reboots and just played around with some of the theme elements, and it does all appear to be taking effect. So I didn't think it would be quite as simple as that, but it seems to be okay. So I think what we'll do now is install a few things just to demonstrate the rollback feature. So of course you can kind of temporarily go back to a previous version just by selecting an older version in the bootloader, but then we can also use a sort of a permanent one where we actually use a RPM OS tree command to roll back. So first off, we need to make something obvious that we're going to install and then show you the rollback where it will no longer be present. So what we'll do, we'll kind of transform the whole desktop. So we'll go for RPM OS tree install. We're going to get Kvantum, and we're going to get Latte Dock, and we'll also get, let's get Vert Manager as well. Okay, so we've done some changes to our desktop now and installed some additional packages to demonstrate the way the rollback feature is going to work. So as you can see, we've installed Virtual Machine Manager, which actually is the kind of application that I would install on this machine using RPM OS tree install. And we've also popped a dock at the bottom with Latte Dock. So now what we're going to do is open up a terminal, and we're just going to simply do RPM OS tree rollback. So RPM OS tree rollback. Okay, so that rollback has now been completed. So as you can see, there's been a lot of packages it's had to go ahead and remove, things like for the virtual machine and Latte Dock, etc. And now all we need to do is do the same thing that we have been doing prior and do a systemctl reboot. So it's now going to go into a previous version like so. So let's do a reboot and then see that all of those applications that we did install are no longer present. Right, so we have now rolled back to a previous deployment. So we have gone back in time, and as you can see, the Latte Dock is no longer present at the bottom of our screen. Now, one of the applications that we chose to install prior to doing that rollback was Kvantum. So if we now go ahead and try and launch Kvantum, you will notice that the command is no longer found. Now, to prove that there's no funny business and that will indeed launch the Kvantum theming manager, I've created a toolbox and installed Kvantum in there. So let's go ahead and enter. I'm just going to copy the exact same command that we've written beforehand. And as you can see, it's going to launch Kvantum without any issues whatsoever, proving to you that the rollback feature has worked. And with that, it really does make a very stable system, almost to the point of being unbreakable, and it's one of the really cool things and standout features of immutable distributions that operate in this way. And I think that is where I'm going to wrap up with my first look at Fedora's new spin-off Kinoite, of course their new immutable desktop distribution featuring KDE. All in all, I really like it. So I've always been quite a big fan of the immutable distributions, as you'll know from some of the previous videos that I've did. I've always been very excited to check them out, especially when there's a new one up and coming. I just kind of want to see how they work things out. Now, there was a few quirks that we did run into and a few little bugs and errors here and there that I'm sure will be ironed out, a little bit further down the line. But for a new distribution, sort of making its official release, I'm very happy with it, and I'm actually going to keep it on another machine and spend a bit more time with it and just see how we go. Now, I think in the next few days, if time serves me well, we're going to go ahead and also check out just the standard new version of Fedora, which is of course featuring GNOME 41. Now, if you're going to go ahead and try this yourself and you're not familiar with this style of operating system, definitely do have a quick flick through of their user guide. It's worth checking out, and also have a look at the little cheat sheets to get you up and running with some of the commonly used commands. Thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, please subscribe, and if you've really enjoyed it, you can consider supporting me on Patreon. Join the Discord, there's a link in the description below, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye bye.